All right, so we've been through the process. First one was this is really getting the foundations of the orchestration and how the interaction. So always my first step is to start with that human, understand what is happening in the company, what is happening in the system, because improving and adjusting at that early stage save a lot of time when it comes in larger orchestration. It'll allow you to understand what you want to achieve in the future, as well as what you're currently achieving today. Identify systems you want to automate and understand the process. Second stage that we looked at was the RPA. So the RPA is what I call the patchwork. What systems do you have today? What manual activity today? What are the repetitive activities today? And how can we automate them? How can we save that human resource labor, that time, that effort? So instead of having people repetitive tasks, they're investing into high value tasks. They're really gaining extra value from performing thought task and activity, research and ideas rather than just manual repetitive tasks. So that's where we got. The next one we're going to focus on is the workflow. So we're not going to go into all the details, but we're just going to start it. So now we've got armed with our RPA, our human workflow, and now we're going to start moving. What is the future going to hold for us? How can we start automating different aspects of an organization? So let's get started. So just to remind you, we've done the human workflow, RPA, and we're moving on to the orchestration side of things. So let's go into it. So what is orchestration work? So an orchestration workflow is how information flows through a system, but not a single, multiple systems, through an organization of systems. So it's looking beyond one application or one API or one human activity, but it's a bridge between all of them. It enables us to perform some process and indicate of how things are. So we can control the flow of the information, what gets executed, when gets executed. So then we can start introducing concepts like rules, which I won't get too much into here, but we'll use basic decision trees, basic decision gates, and get in. Next one, it's a visual guide about how the system works. Something is important that workflow execute, orchestrations execute, which means you can see how it can go through. So this is not just a pretty chart, it's something where it's allocating a task to a person and a person has to respond, forming a process and waiting for a process to respond. So it's a visual guide that's practical, space guide. It allows you to add automation um, to any additional systems onto it, keep creating it and deploying new versions. It shifts control to the super important business. When they can visualize it, they can see execute. Now we can judge the performance of it. And as a business, as especially a business owner, you can see how your company is performing. What are the blocks? You know, you take any kind of funnel or process system, but now you have true insights. You're not going into systems. You're seeing how that information flows from one end to, and making ability because it's visual diagram able to be changed. Take time as to processes, creating bridges and automation, and we'll get into some of that today. And a measurable and actionable APIs. The orchestration, we can see what is working, what is not, what are the bottlenecks in the company. So to create a deep analytical view of how orchestration and how workflow is performing. So just to revisit, this is the workflow that we had to our human workflow. So we have a sick gone in and someone's called in sick, they filled out a form. If they're injured, it goes through the sub process. Once the sub process is complete, then it moves on 24 hours to complete it. Otherwise, we get the HR manager involved to handle the process. So we're going to take this workflow and we're going to adapt it a little bit. So what we're going to cover, so we're going to add the RPA system and trigger point. We're going to add a microservice and update API, update the system and internal response and add events to the process and API response. So let me swap a live demo. Okay, so first let's go to our live demo and let's say we're going to move on to our first part and we're going to adjust this. So now we've got our human workflow, we're sending emails, and we're going to go through this example. Got to the point where they're submitting the W claim, the workers' compensation claim. So let's say this is a third party, and we've gone to our RPA and we've invested in our RPA. So the RPA has gone a process of handling this claim. So it's going to a website, logging in, it's typing the information we got from the incident report and the initial form, and it's putting it into the claim. Claim will be submitted, and then it's going to record a result. RPA is going to respond with a result, and then we're going to update a internal system. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to lose our manual task. So just for reference, I'm going to put the manual task up here, and that's going to, you see it's outside the subpro. So it's going to remove this from the sub. Going to add a new module here. So you think, okay, it's coming in here. We have our decision. The decision is that we're going to submit a claim. So what we create is a service task. Service task, I'm going to say RPA call WC submission. But most RPAs can be triggered by an API. So it's going to pass an API, it's going to pass all the information that's collected to the RPA. The RPA is going to action. So the RPA, there's two ways to work. Wait for the RPA to execute, or we could wait for a response. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a new gateway. So we're going to start the process. We're going to create an event gateway. So once our RPA has finished, we're going to receive an event. RPA completed successful. So the RPA completed success, right? Excellent. So with our event, the RPA is going to say, hey, look at that. We did it successful, and we're able to record the information. So then we're going to create a service task. This is calling a service task could be anything. A piece of code that you write, a API, but normally it's a very small piece of function. So this is the idea that once we have the data, we can back and forth change the location. So it's an action which, in this case, update HR system with WC claim ID. So let's say that the RPA has gone through, taken whatever, it took an hour to run. Whatever, there's some system was slow or the system was down and it's trying. It's taken a while to run and just given it some breathing time to run. Maybe it involved multiple system and it's a complex. We don't know. So something's happened and it's run and we wait for it and it's going to call back with an event. Say, hey, I'm done. And this is your new ID. The ID is passed on and the system is updated. So we're pretty happy here at this point. So what else could happen? So at this point, let's say we have a new event here. Our event here is a timed event. So we're going to give it 4 hours to complete. I'm going to say, okay, if it's not completed, whatever reason, it's failed. So we know that this RPA will fail and have the information. So suddenly can go back to our human task. So our human task was to submit the claim manually. This person has now going to submit the claim, and once they've done them, they're going to move on and submit that data that is going to be recorded in workflow, and it's going to update the HR system. See that my diagram is getting bigger and bigger, so we're going to put out our diagram. So once it's cleaned up, we're going to continue our sequence. So this is our first scenario. We have 2 events triggering. We have 2 alternate paths. If this has failed, it will happen. So this is the ability to create an event. And we have our microprocess, which we'll call to update the system. And we're going to call the API. So that's our first process. So you can see a few of them. So we're going to do process down here. Before, our human activity was to submit the disability. But what we're going to do here is change something. So instead of making that a human task, we're going to say that the claim was manual. So we have to, we can say that there's an API here. So suddenly where we had a human task, where a human had to go in and do it, now we have an API do it. So in this case, when we had disability, we're going to say that we updated 2 systems. So here we have the decision, go this path, this path. This time we're going to do something different. We're going to move it into parallel. So let's say we have our disability claim and we have output is disability number. So in this case, taking our diagram up here, I'm going to say that it needs updated to system. So first, update HR system with claim, let's call it this claim ID. It's probably a different field, definition. But let's say also update insurance company disability claim ID. So what we're doing in parallel, so let's can do multiple activities. So the idea is, of course, we could have done them in a straight line, and we could have executed the other one, but this time we see get through this process as quick as. So we're just simply going to create dual activities. So our activities, they completed, you can visually indicate that they merge back again. This one's finished, this one is finished. And go. Let's just continue on. So here we've covered updating the system internally for APIs and microservice, RPAs, and events. So although this was a very simple example, the thing is now we've removed two core human activities. So we've eliminated the need for those processes. So we've started with a human activity, and now we're moving into automation activities one at a time. So this is a good way to approach your workflow. Your workflow engine is the ability to upgrade your current process. So it doesn't mean we might not have the human tasks in there, but if this is minimizing the event, an RPA, we know the RPA is 80% successful and fails because of maybe the third party is down a lot, or for whatever reason, and say, okay, it completed. Okay, no, it failed. So now we need to get a human involved to say what's going to happen. But here we're giving it a 4-hour chance to get back to it. Doesn't respond? Okay, let's see what happened. And we go through the process and we can continue the process. Here we've eliminated the human activity completely and replaced it with a system. So these are great things that could happen. Let's add a little bit more complexity system. So let's say we do have this human activity. And what we want to do is we can say, well, this person hasn't finished their task and the event comes in, move on. So just cancel the task for the data and we move on. So this person hasn't finished and did get a completion, we'd still able and be able to force it. Or another scenario is the timer in here, say they haven't completed it in 4 hours, let's retry the whole back and keep trying. So you can see that there's many ways. So this is controlling the logic and the flow in the system. Each one of these points can take in a decision. And as I said, we can have things like default flows to allow us to choose the default path. If we don't have the right information, we can choose the the default. So you can see how we've gone from human workflow. Now we're integrating RPA that we've built and creating a new exit. We're having a system which is partially event controlled when events are relevant. Now to say, okay, a third party could be triggered via an email, could be by an API, it could be by anything, timer that would then cause it onto the next phase. So this is event driven, this is procedure driven, and we move to parallel activities. So here we have our parallel activity, create more efficiency in case there is dual things to be done. So we can see that the routes will follow, and then we can and align routes as we go through the process. So here the strategy thing is we model the workflow, work out what we want from the future. So we generally create two models. Create the current model and we create the ideal model. But not implement the ideal model. No reason to implement the ideal model in its entirety from day one. The thing is you want to get the best bonus and best benefit out of it. So by adding one part of a system, like we just have done here, we're able to automate a small chunk of the system, check the results, make sure it's efficient before we move on to this one. It doesn't mean we can't be doing different workflows in parallel, but it's just a way to capture the right efficiencies at the right time. So for some reason, if this is failing or another aspect is not working correct, we have time to fix, adjust, and then create our backup plan. So, or I talk about escalation, that's one strategy. Exception handling, another strategy in terms of things that we could do. Maybe this is another sub process in failure, you can always get a human involved. But the idea is that as we go for automation, we're slowly removing an interaction in. So what decisions can it make? There's a lot of ways to make decisions. We have basically here, this doesn't have to be as many as we want. And we can create rule engines. So a rule engine would be something like if there were tiers or calculations or certain criteria, could add functions to the system to create more complex decisions. And that's kind of how we go about process automation and each one of these is thinking like that might be 2 hours worth of work. Now it's gone down to the 20% of the time. So 20% of 2 hours, whatever that is, 12 minutes. So we've gone from 120 minutes down to 24 minutes, 20%. So see that that's going to have a big impact over time. This is escalation, so generally something that's just going to happen, but it's as you automation and efficiency over time. So that's where this orchestration it works ideal for replacing human activities. It looks ideal as the benchmark as look between one system and another system and how they interact with each other. How you control who masters the data. So when you're dealing with multiple systems, in this case, our master data, the owner of the data is the submission portal. So this being a government one, maybe, this being a private one, that data is the owner, and that needs to be pushed to a HR system collecting of that data as it comes. So all these elements, and this is just a very high level example of how you take that human workflow with it in complete automation. So just to summarize, we added so that was our event and our time. We add a microservice, which is a very small piece of code to update a system, in this case, the HR system. Updated the system internally with response API, so we are getting the response from one system, that government website, and then we're moving that data and passing that data to the next one to update the other system. And here with our RPA, we had the events side, whether we wait for the RPA to finish after 4 hours or so. That's just some of the elements which go from the full automation. So if you're looking to do this, if you need consulting on the workflow, or you're looking for automation, or you want to start this journey, there's a booking link in the description here. So I recommend making a booking, discuss what your systems are, how you're working, and a strategy about how to model and move that automation, create you a complete automation plan. So thank you for your time.